For the first time in nearly 3 years, all 4 major US indexes closed at all-time highs. And in this week's video, Jared's going to cover the news stories from last week and also the historic run the market has been on this year. And I'm going to be covering what to expect this week with vaccines and the election, and also cover a staggering statistic as to how much money has actually been printed here in the US this year.
As Matt mentioned, the U.S. markets closed at record highs last Friday, and one of the biggest reasons is because the Russell 2000 was up 2% last week and is now up over 13% for the year. And the Russell 2000, which used to be the lagger in the U.S. market since 2017, is no longer the lagger, as the Dow Jones was up only 1% last week, but the Dow Jones is now lagging this year, up about 6% for the year. The S&P 500 also had a strong week, up over 1.5%, now up almost 15% for the year, while the NASDAQ was the strongest this week, up over 2%, and up almost 40% year to date. Foreign and emerging markets were both strong this week as well, both up over 1%, while foreign markets are up a little over 4%, and emerging markets are in line with the S&P 500 and the Russell 2000, as it's up about 13.5% year to date. There were 3 major news stories from last week. And first is that the jobless numbers came back less than expected, as the U.S. economy only added 245,000 jobs in November. Another statistic that came out last week is that the unemployment rate went down from 6.9 to 6.7%, which on the surface seems good. But in reality, the reason this happened is that because the participation rate in the unemployment numbers actually declined, showing that more people are actually just exiting the workforce completely. The second news story is that oil extended its gains to 9-month highs after OPEC and its allies agreed to gradually start increasing production. Now, they did this in anticipation of a continued global economic recovery, especially after a coronavirus vaccine is now on the horizon. The last news story is that the US dollar hit a 2.5-year low versus other major currencies. And Matt's going to talk a little bit more about exactly why the US dollar continues to lose value.
So I wanted to start by talking about why we've seen a declining dollar over the past year. And we can really attribute that to one major factor, and that is how much money has actually been printed this year. Now, there is one statistic that is pretty mind-blowing, and that is 35% of all of the dollars that are in circulation right now have been printed in the last 10 months. Now, we can see that directly translate to the stock market. Since the March lows, we've been on a rally, and now we're sitting at all-time highs on all of the 4 major US indexes. So all of that money is being put to work in the market, and essentially it's being propped up while the real economy in the United States hasn't rebounded. A great example of this is actually over the past month. The monetary supply has actually increased the most on record, forcing the market to go higher in the face of a pandemic with increasing case numbers, lockdowns reoccurring, and everything that's going on with our election. You would think the combination of those 3 things would have translated over to market volatility, but it hasn't. The market just continues to push higher. So now let's talk about the election and a couple important dates that are going to occur over the next week. First is December 8th. That is the safe harbor deadline. And that is essentially where all disputes need to be settled before the 8th, and if they're not, then states are not allowed to be certified for their election results. Then we have December the 14th. That's when states actually sit down and vote to put their electors forward to the Electoral College. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next week as these dates are quickly approaching. Now, it is important to note that there are a bunch of constitutional scholars that have gotten together to discuss the election, and they stated that the Constitution only has one date, and that is January 20th as Inauguration Day. All of these other dates are essentially arbitrary statutes that are not constitutional. So it seems like we're going to be in for another long month. Now, December 8th is another important day around the world, and in the UK they're calling it V-Day, and the V stands for vaccination, as a COVID-19 vaccine is going to be made public for the first time tomorrow. So the UK will be the first country, and the vaccine will be rolled out within 2 weeks in the state of Texas here in the United States. So another thing to watch this week is we have the first election lawsuit that has reached the Supreme Court here in Pennsylvania. And that is Sean Parnell's lawsuit against Act 77, saying that mail-in ballots are essentially unconstitutional in the state of Pennsylvania. So we should get that ruling this week. Thanks for watching, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook. See you next week.